Hey guys, Sam from West Meadow Rabbits here, and I'm happy to say that spring is on the way, which means a lot of you guys are going to be looking for breeding stock for the first time, and even if you've had breeding stock before, maybe you're looking to get some new blood into your herd. So I feel like today is a good day to discuss where you should be getting meat rabbit breeding stock from. So full disclosure, I obviously breed meat rabbits, and primarily I breed meat rabbits for meat for myself and selling breeding stock, specifically of New Zealand Reds. So keep that in mind when I give you advice and take everything with a grain of salt, although some of what I'm saying is going to be kind of counterintuitive and maybe even against like some of my own interests, but at the end of the day, it's more important that you get the right breeding stock so you can get your program off to a good start and avoid any bad experiences. So the first thing you need to decide is, are you going purebred or not? I have some videos on this, I'll probably make some more, and it doesn't make that much of a difference depending on what you're trying to do. So you need to figure out, am I going to be doing this for purely meat for myself? Am I going to want to sell a little extra breeding stock on the side? Am I ever going to want to get into shows or sell show stock for myself, for others, or 4-H? Or am I really just looking to do this as a backyard meat production thing with maximum efficiency? And depending on the answers to those questions is really going to be whether you need to be getting purebred stock or not. Basically, I would draw the line that if you are only looking to do meat for yourself, or you are only looking to get into a commercial meat type operation, then you don't need purebred stock, and it's probably not even going to be the best for you. The most productive animals are usually multi-generational hybrids that have been designed for one thing and one thing only, and that's to grow a lot of meat really fast. Purebreds, specifically the commercial breeds like Californians, New Zealands, Florida Whites, those animals have also been bred to produce a lot of meat, but there's other standards in there like, what the color should be, body type, so they are not as dialed in. Now, the difference between a really well-bred New Zealand and a really well-bred hybrid is probably not going to be that much, but it's just something to keep in mind. However, when you go with the hybrid routes or the maximum meat production route, you're also permanently locking yourself off from any kind of shows, whether it's county fairs or breed clubs. You're also not going to be able to sell that as show stock or purebred stock, which would obviously be very unethical if you did. So it's really important that you kind of know where you want to go in the future. If you don't know where you want to go, I would recommend just erring on the side of purebred, just because it leaves a little more options open. And if you end up saying, I really just want to focus on meat, then you can get some Californians, make your own hybrids. But if you get the rabbit bug in the future and you want to start doing shows and going to county fairs, you have that option as well. So most of this video is going to be focused on purebreds, which is kind of what I specialize in. However, all of this information will still apply for hybrids. The only thing specifically I want to say on hybrids is it may be a little bit more tricky for you to find actually good breeding stock, because a poorly bred hybrid is not going to outperform a well-bred purebred. And with a purebred, you know what you're getting. There's a pedigree, especially with commercial breeds. They're not just built for looks, they're built for production. So if you're getting a hybrid, it's probably going to be from some kind of commercial operation, probably a farm, and I highly recommend you check out that farm, scope it out. And with hybrids, the pedigree matters obviously not at all, but more important is you want to see numbers related to yield, how quickly do they grow out, what percentage of the grow out is meat, how many rabbits are being born in a litter. That's really important information, especially for a production operation. That also applies to purebreds, but we'll get into that in a sec. So now that you know kind of which route you're going to go for variety, breed, and whether it's going to be a purebred or a hybrid, you need to locate a supplier. Now, when we say rabbit breeder, that is a very loose term. Okay, a rabbit breeder could be somebody in their backyard with 3 rabbits, or somebody in their backyard with 20 rabbits, like me. Or it could be a professional operation with 300 rabbits and a guy who's got tons of grand championships under his belt. Or it could be a guy who's doing this purely for commercial reasons, never shown a day in his life, but he still breeds the rabbits, well. So you've got to kind of decide, again, what you're looking for and what's convenient. Part of this is going to be limited by the fact on where you are. It's harder to find some varieties and some breeds. It's going to be really, really lucky if you get what you're looking for within an hour's drive. Depending on where you are in the country, that may be easier than in other parts, but you are going to be somewhat limited based on that factor as well. Regardless of who you decide to go with, I obviously recommend scoping out the place and making sure that you like the way it looks. But here's the really, really important thing, guys. There is no one-size-fits-all here. The most important thing you're looking for when you go to breeders' places is how are you going to be raising the rabbits? Because I stress this all the time on this channel. Genetics is so malleable, and different herds of the same breed and even different lines in the same herd can have really, really different genetics. So you could have 3 breeders in New Zealand. One purely does pasture-raised grass-fed, one purely does confinement, and the other does a colony. Those rabbits are going to perform vastly differently if you put them in a different situation. So it's really, really important to try to focus on getting rabbits from the type of environment that you're planning on doing. If you're planning on having your rabbits out on pasture, make sure you at least get rabbits that have been eating fresh food. And similarly, if you're having them confined in cages, it's probably going to be a little trickier if you pull a rabbit out of a colony and try to go that route. And none of this is per se going to be a deal breaker, but it's just going to make your life a lot easier, because if those rabbits have been bred generation after generation, they're going to pick up traits for that kind of environment. A quick example, I had a baby fall out of the nest a couple days ago and got squashed behind the nest box. That kind of rabbit hopped out of the nest box earlier than its siblings. Was it a coincidence? Maybe. But in a cage kind of operation, if, let's just say, 1 in every litter does that, and I keep breeding the same rabbits over and over again, eventually that, those genes that kind of lead to a more exploratory rabbit is going to be worked out of the herd, thereby making it better for my cage operation that they are more likely to stay in the nest box rather than hop out until I take the nest box out. It's not a great example, but that's just one example. There are many, many others that apply to this. Another common one being sore hocks. Rabbits that get sore hocks easily are not going to last long in a cage operation, so that'll kind of get weeded out. So it's really important to not only know a breeder, get to know a reputable breeder, but also make sure that their operation is at least somewhat similar to what you're planning on doing, which will make the genetics of their rabbits fit much better into whatever you're trying to doing, and it will save you a lot of time trying to adapt them to your circumstance. On a similar note to that, should you be shipping in rabbits? Some of my reds are actually from California, which is literally as far as you can go away from me on mainland US. I'm in coastal Massachusetts. And we have very different environments, we have very different bacterial environments, we have very different weather, and no surprise, the Californian rabbits, not the breed, but the literal New Zealand reds from California, didn't do that great. They got a lot sicker than my rabbits have. I've had more issues with them related to disease, performance, than I have with my rabbits. However, they were really, really nice. They were the best purebred stock I could get my hands on. Now compare that to some of my local New England reds, who are not anywhere near as well built as these rabbits. Their coats weren't as nice, their temperaments weren't as nice, their meat distribution wasn't as nice, but they were rugged as hell. And since they were used to New England rough living, they had no problem adapting to my environment down here. They were, from other parts of New England, they had no problem adapting to what I've got going on here. Basically no health issues, vigorous breeding, and very few other issues to speak of. Now this is a classic example of trade-offs, and so I knew this was going to happen, and that's why I'm crossing my Californian line with my New England line to kind of get a better all-around rabbit that's tougher and also, better type, if you will. Now, to be completely fair, if I took my rabbits and sent them to California, they'd have a really hard time too. The heat would be really rough on them. The dryness would probably bother them as well, and they would have just as many issues. So what I'm trying to say here is that it's also really, really smart to try, if at all possible, to get rabbits from your local region, because they're going to be adapted to the disease profiles, the weather, and all the other nuances that come with the region. Rabbits are really sensitive. Changing their water supply can even have a problem, cause problems with them. So rabbits from your local area are going to be best adapted to your local area. Obviously, based on your program, if you've got to go 10 hours away or fly something in from across the country, it's not the end of the world again. Like all of these things, it's not going to totally torpedo your program, but you just have to be ready to expect more issues. The final thing I want to discuss is, should you be getting pedigrees, especially if you're just looking to do this in your backyard with a few rabbits. Right away, I can tell you pedigree rabbits are going to be 50 to 100% more expensive. If you're looking on Craigslist for, even if it's a purebred, oh, it's a silver fox on Craigslist for 20 bucks. That rabbit's probably not coming with the pedigree, and that may or may not be worth it to you. But personally, I always think you should get rabbits that at least the breeder is willing to provide you with pedigrees. Now, why am I saying this? You may not ever need them, but there's two really useful things about a pedigree. Number one, again, as I've said, you may end up getting the rabbit bug and deciding to go a lot further than you originally anticipated. You may say, hey, this is awesome, I'm so proud of my rabbits, I want to take them to a county fair or an American Rabbit Breeders Association show, in which case you'll need a pedigree. And, you know, it's really, really useful to know when your rabbit was born, what its parents were, did his parents have any interesting color genetics. That kind of information can't hurt, and it can only help. But for me, the most important thing about a pedigree is it shows the breeder, no matter their size, even if they've only got, 5 or 10 rabbits or 500 rabbits, if they're willing to do pedigrees, it shows they're taking it seriously. It takes a little bit of effort to put together a pedigree and keep track of breeding records that well. And that kind of breeder is not just somebody looking to get rid of a few extra rabbits from their little backyard meat rabbit operation. That's somebody who's putting in some effort. Even if it is a backyard operation, they're breeding intentionally, if you will. And it's not a 100% guarantee, and obviously you need to talk to the breeder, use your judgment, make sure what they're doing matches up with your goals. But it is a very good sign that that breeder is taking what they're doing seriously and that your stock is going to be reasonably well bred. So these are just a few guidelines that I would recommend anybody new to meat rabbits takes into consideration. Again, a lot of these variables are going to depend on where you're located, and you'll kind of figure out what the going rate is in your market. So if you see a rabbit for $15, that may not be that crazy if you're somewhere where there's a lot of competition. The cost of raising rabbits is pretty cheap. On the other hand, if you're somewhere where there's not a lot of meat rabbits, or it's a really high quality rabbit, $50 may not even seem that expensive. So you've got to kind of take all this into mind, really focus on your area, and again, remember your goals always when you're getting started, and also don't forget to leave yourself some wiggle room in the future in case you want to change things up. So I hope that video was helpful. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I really appreciate everybody watching, and I appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video. Thanks a lot, guys.